Welcome, dear listeners, to the Carolina Hates podcast, brought to you by Wreak Havoc Productions and A Darker World. I'm your host, Dan Sellers. The Black Monk House in Pontefract, England, is said to be home to the most violent poltergeist in history. Joe and Jean Pritchard bought the house in 1966 and moved with their two children and Jean's mother. At first, things were simply strange, as puddles of water would spontaneously manifest in different rooms, and an unidentified white powdery substance would fall from out of midair. At one point, a white glove floated around the house, going from room to room and touching each person as if worn by some unseen hand. Green foam ran from the bathroom spigot. As time went on, the events became more insistent. The family was awakened at night by loud, booming crashes that seemingly came from nowhere. Objects would levitate in the air, and upside-down crosses began to manifest on the walls. Objects would vanish, only to be found in another room later. Photographs were slashed, and at one point, the couple's 15-year-old daughter was dragged out of bed and up the stairs by an unseen presence. The ordeal left her with hand-shaped bruises around her neck. The Catholic Church performed an exorcism on the house, but instead of getting rid of the entity, it only pissed it off. A short time later, Joe and Jean woke up to see a shadowy cloaked apparition standing over their bed. It looked like a monk, the Black Monk. Before it was over, the apparition showed itself to the entire family and several paranormal investigators that were in the house. While that's cute, I hardly think of a ghost that pulls someone out of the bed as the most violent poltergeist in history. It's almost laughable. We've got something scarier for you. How about the Phantom Sniper of New Jersey? In 1927, drivers in Camden, New Jersey started reporting their windshields being shot out. Dozens of cars over a 6-month period. Only minor injuries were sustained from the flying glass because there were no bullets, and no gunshots were ever heard. Or what about the sadist, known as the Jabber, who may or may not have been a ghost? In 1925, in Bridgeport, Connecticut, women were attacked by a man wielding an ice pick. The attacker did not try to kill the women, but repeatedly jabbed them in the breast and buttocks with the pick. Every attack occurred in broad daylight, in high-traffic public places, and yet no one ever got a good look at the man. And after the attack, he vanished before anyone could give chase. It's possible that the man knew the area enough to have a well-thought-out escape route, but many locals began to think that it was a sadistic ghost. But for my money, fire-wielding ghosts are the scariest of all. These poltergeists set fire after fire without warning. The attack usually lasts a few days, but has been known to go on for months, and it happens more often than you think. The first documented case was in Germany in the year 858 AD. The details are sketchy, but we know that over a 2-week period, crops were set ablaze and a farmhouse was hailed by showers of stones. Attacks like this have occurred all over the world. Italy, England, South Africa, Canada, France, and several other occurrences here in the United States. In Odin, Indiana, William Hackler was walking to the barn when he smelled smoke. He ran to the house and found the upstairs bedroom in flames. He called the fire department, and the fire was quickly extinguished. The fire seemed to have started in the middle of the mattress. While the firefighters were questioning Hackler, another blaze ignited in a different room, and then another, and another. In a span of 12 hours, 28 separate fires have broken out all throughout the house. Among other things, a dishwasher, some window blinds, a desk, and a medicine cabinet had all burst into flames. The pages of a book burnt to a crisp without ever charring the cover. And then the phenomena ended as abruptly as it had started. Another story comes from Orland Hills, Illinois, when a woman noticed a strange haze in her home. It had a sulfurous smell, and she called the fire department to report a gas leak. When the firemen arrived, there was no evidence of the haze or a gas leak. As soon as they left, the furniture and the window curtains burst into flames. The fire department returned and said that it appeared as if the flames had shot out of the wall outlets, although the outlets themselves were undamaged. New fires popped up over the next few days and over the next few weeks, even after the house was entirely rewired by a new contractor. The daughter was the only person who had been in the house during each conflagration, so a detective showed up to question her. While they were in the living room talking, the fire alarm went off upstairs. The officer ran upstairs to the girl's very bedroom. He found blue flames burning out at the wall outlets. The fire spread quickly, but he was able to get it under control. After that, the house was completely cut off from the power grid, and still, the fires continued. There are similar stories from Flat Rock, Ohio, Tarpon Springs, Florida, and Macomb, Illinois. Unfortunately, the most famous case is the Voodoo Fires of Alabama, involving Calvin Tuck and his wife and their 6 children. But those were fake. The family had recently moved from Birmingham to Talladega, Alabama. Like the other cases, 17 separate fires sprung up in a single afternoon, in full view of the family, the firefighters, and other spectators. The family left the house and moved in with Tuck's brother. The fires followed them. They moved again. Authorities investigated both homes and found a phosphorus residue where the fires originated, but dismissed arson because, in order to achieve the spontaneous fires, the culprit would have to know how to emulsify and aerosol the chemical. Meanwhile, Tuck consulted a voodoo practitioner who gave him a spell to dispel the fires. It didn't work. The fires followed them to their new home. Finally, after 4 weeks and 52 fires, the couple's 9-year-old son admitted to setting the fires using match heads. However, we wouldn't be telling you all this unless there was some sort of regional element involved. In Bladenboro, North Carolina, in 1932, Charles Williamson and his daughter Katie were alarmed by his wife's screams. They ran into the other room to find Lydia Williamson's dress on fire. Panicked, they ripped the garment off with just their bare hands. The dress was reduced to charred rag, but none of the Williamsons were harmed. Later that day, Mr. Williamson's pants caught fire. Luckily, this time they were hanging in the closet and not being worn. Needless to say, the family didn't get a lot of sleep, but the night passed without any further incident. The next day, however, while Mr. Williamson was telling the story to a neighbor, another fire erupted in one of the bed coverings, and then later the curtains. The next 3 days saw several of the family's possessions consumed in a bluish flame that produced no smoke and very little odor. Each time the fire only burned that item in which it started, never spreading to anything else. After this, the family moved out and turned the house over to the authorities, who investigated every inch of it. They found no gas leaks, no wiring problems, and no combustible chemicals that could explain the phenomenon. In fact, more fires broke out while the house was being investigated. In front of the fire chief, various contractors, and even the mayor of Bladenboro. After 5 days and 20 fires, as in the other cases, the fire simply stopped and never erupted again. So this brings us to the next logical evolution in this phenomenon: spontaneous human combustion. Where a conflagration initiates inside a human body with no external ignition source. There have been over 200 documented cases of spontaneous human combustion since its first report in 1746. The body usually burns so fast and so hot that even the bones are reduced to ash. However, often the hands and feet are found unburnt. On March 1st, 1953, drivers along Pleasantburg Road in Greenville, South Carolina, noticed smoke coming from a car parked on the shoulder. A couple of cars parked to see if they could help. What they found was not a car on fire, but a car with its entire interior filled with thick, black smoke. As they attempted to open the door, the car inexplicably drove forward a couple hundred feet, veering off the highway, and rolled twice down a 270-foot ravine. Police and firefighters arrived. The windows of the vehicle were kicked in and the interior doused by the firemen, even though no flames were visible. When the smoke had cleared, they found the body of Wayman Wood. Mr. Wood had been almost fully burned by the flames. The steering wheel and the plastic door coverings had melted, but other than that, the car sustained almost no further damage. Another story comes from the University of Nashville in Tennessee. January 5th, 1835 was cold, like single digits cold. Professor James Hamilton presented his morning class lecture as he did every day. He was trained in mathematics, astronomy, and natural philosophy. At 11 that morning, he walked back to his room and began taking some atmospheric readings. As he did, he felt a slight discomfort in his left leg, as if someone had pulled out one of his leg hairs. Minutes passed and the sensation intensified to that of a bee sting. He rubbed the area with his hand, but that only made it hurt worse. He pulled up his pants leg and found that his leg was on fire. There was a dime-sized area which spouted a jet of silvery-looking flames. Knowing that a fire requires oxygen in order to burn, he cupped his hand over the flame to cut off the air supply. The flames went out. After the initial shock of the ordeal, the scientist in him took over and he began examining the wound. The area was small, but the damage was quite severe. He also noticed that there was no sign of fire damage to his trousers. The flames had most definitely burned from the inside out. He treated the wound himself, but after a few days it was obvious that he was out of his element. He consulted a local physician who confirmed that the professor had survived a case of spontaneous human combustion, which puts him in a very, very small class. Only a handful of people have survived this phenomenon. Science has been unable to present any plausible explanation to this phenomenon. The human body is, after all, about 70% water. Now here's a thought. What if, just maybe, spontaneous human combustion is caused by the same fire-wielding poltergeists? Of course, there's no evidence for this, but it's about as plausible of an explanation as anyone else has presented. To learn more about these stories, check out North Carolina's Haunted 100 Volume 1, Seaside Specters by Daniel Barefoot. There's also Strange Tales of the Dark and Bloody Ground, authentic accounts of restless spirits, haunted honky-tonks, and eerie events in Tennessee by Christopher K. Coleman. There's weekendweird.com, listverse.com, mysteriousuniverse.org, and strange.com. This episode was researched and written by Jeffrey Cochran and was produced and hosted by me, Dan Sellers. You can find everything Jeff's up to at adarkerworld.com, and you can find everything that we're up to at wreakhavocproductions.com. Be sure to like our Facebook page at facebook.com/Carolina Haynes. You can find everything about this show and the upcoming Carolina Haynes book at our new website, carolinahaynes.com. Be sure to subscribe to this show, share with your friends, and leave us a review. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. Feel free to reach out to me directly at wreakhavocproductions@gmail.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a new episode. Tune in to hear more about the things that go bump in the night.